Well, in theory, Matt, what they're going to be looking at is the long-term budget for the European Union. In particular, we call it the multi-annual framework, essentially deciding what the priorities are going to be. One of the conversations the finance ministers are focused on, according to Mario Centeno, the man that runs the Euro group, which is the Euro-focused group of finance ministers, those that are part of the Eurozone, is looking at a potential instrument down the road by the end of this year. They'd like to try and get ratified next year, which will essentially allow for a new fund that will try and support reforms, structural reforms, and also investment in members of the Eurozone. But in terms of Italy, really interesting over the last week or so, of course, we've had this decision from the European Commission not to pursue what's known as an excessive deficit procedure. That could have resulted in fines of billions of euros for the Italians. It's the second time in around 7 months the European Commission has stepped back from the brink of taking that kind of action. And Pierre Moscovici, he's the commissioner here for economic and financial affairs. He was asked about this yesterday, as you might well imagine, because this was quite a surprise last week when they made this decision. And in particular, he was questioned about whether Italy would be able to avoid this next year, because of course we have this annual situation whereby European governments submit their spending plans to the Commission to have them scrutinized and then have questions fired back at them. The Italians did this last year. After a bunch of back and forth with Brussels, they managed to get away with avoiding this excessive deficit procedure. Then they made a deal. It got to a situation this year where their numbers weren't looking promising again, and that's where they came close once more to facing this series of penalties. But this man, Moscovici, Pierre Moscovici, was asked about next year, and here's what he had to say.
We have planned, forecasted a deficit at 3.5% next year. Of course, this would not fit. This would not be acceptable. This would lead to a public debt of over 145%. The Italian government said that they will stick to what they sent us. It was in April, 2.1%. Well, it's up to them to define the measures that go there, increasing. And it of course includes tax measures. We don't have to give the details of what they should do, but what is clear is that they have committed to some global figures and that they must stick to it.
So there's quite a few numbers there. Just to unpack those for you briefly, Matt. Essentially, European rules are that you can't have a deficit to GDP of greater than 3% on an annual basis, and you shouldn't have debt to GDP of more than 60%. Of course, the Italians are way above 130% when it comes to debt to GDP, and they're promising just over 2% for their deficit next year, whereas the Europeans, Moscovici saying there, are forecasting that number will actually be 3.5, so above the permitted ceiling.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.